Doom and gloom has led to a workplace where around half of professionals feel, quote, emotionally drained and used up. We've gathered some of the company's greatest minds to discuss. Give us the lay of the land as we enter 2026.
Everything is moving faster.
All this change isn't just intellectually challenging, it's very emotionally taxing.
Know who you are, know your achievements, know your story, and shout it from the rooftops.
Beat the odds in 2026. Hi, I'm Jill Wiltfong, Chief Marketing Officer for Korn Ferry, and this is Briefings, our deep dive into topics that corporate leaders need to care about. Let's be honest, 2025 was a doozy of a year for both companies and employees. A tariff tango that completely upended supply chains, record high CEO exits in the face of slowing growth, and one of the toughest job markets we've seen. And all that doom and gloom has led to a workplace where around half of professionals feel, quote, emotionally drained and used up at the end of the day. Need proof? Here's a sobering stat. The number of people taking mental health days has soared by 300% since the pandemic. So yes, it's rough out there, rotten even. But as we plunged into a new year, we had to ask, does it have to be this way? We've talked to a few experts who say a lot of the problem is more about our current mindsets for turning companies around or landing great gigs. We've identified a few key areas where leaders and individuals can focus in this regard, and today we've gathered some of the company's greatest minds from across the globe to discuss them and show us how, despite all the challenges leaders and climbers alike face, they can beat the odds in 2026. Before we start, if you're watching us on YouTube, please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment to let us know your thoughts on this topic. You can also read about this subject today in a great feature in our Briefings magazine, available at airports and online. I'm joined now by four experts from around the globe. From North America, we have Radhika Papandreou and Jean-Marc Laroche. Radhika is Korn Ferry's president of the North America region, and Jean-Marc is president of the Korn Ferry Institute. Representing now Asia Pacific, we have Korn Ferry's president of that region, Esther Caldwell. And rounding off our esteemed group, we have Iktamal Daneshvar, who is vice president of RPO in EMEA. If anyone knows how to beat the odds this year, it's you all. So thanks for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
Hi, Jill.
Hi, Jill.
Hi, Jill.
Hi, Jill.
Radhika, let me start with you. The first area that I'd like to focus on is this growing phenomenon of the always-on company. It's a trend that we explore in our Briefings magazine cover, where executives barely have a moment to rest between change initiatives. For example, currently 1 in 5 companies is completely reinventing its business every 12 months, as opposed to every 3 to 5 years like it was not too long ago. What happened to cause this really dramatic shift?
I think there are a couple of things that have sort of a confluence of events, if you will, that have created this phenomenon. The first is technology and disruption with AI. And so everything is moving faster, as we all know. Rapidly changing environments, new technology, new learnings, and then that coupled with consumer preferences changing much more rapidly than they were before. Things go viral, trends shift, all of that happens in a much shorter amount of time. And so with those two pieces, and then lastly, just the absolute uncertainty in the macro environment globally, it's creating a lot of need to disrupt your business to stay relevant over time.
Yeah, it is definitely touching everybody. Jean-Marc, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this notion of the always-on company. Is that a healthy way to do business in the long term?
I think that there is a core reason why things are going faster now, is that we are in a platform economy. For the last 30, 40 years, we had the internet, then we had plenty of telecom and mobility capacities. Everybody has a tablet or phone or a computer that we can use. We are on the screen all the time. And all the new technologies, the AI and others, are building on top of that. And therefore, influencers and opinion makers and companies are innovating and creating new trends very quickly, forcing people and organizations to adapt very fast. I think it is clearly not healthy. Australia just passed a law to prohibit people below 16 years old to use social media because it is not healthy.
Esther, I mentioned CEO exits earlier being at record highs. Do you think this always on pace has something to do with that?
I definitely do. If you think about it, all this change isn't just intellectually challenging. It's very emotionally taxing. When I thought about this question, what came to mind for me was some of the sand mandalas made in the Himalayas. If you've ever seen them, these beautiful, colorful, intricate works of art that are built and then intentionally swept away. And the challenge isn't just in the building, it's in the sweeping away. It's in the creating room for something else. And so CEOs and leaders often cling on to things that have worked for them in the past, rather than letting them go and really adopting something else. So I suspect part of the exit isn't the ability to take on new, it's actually to clear the room for it.
That's a scene from the movie Back to the Future Part 3, where Michael J. Fox, as Marty McFly, blasts through a roadblock to get back home. Removing roadblocks is something experts, we just alluded to it a second ago, repeatedly have told us was necessary for companies to get ahead. The hard part sometimes is figuring out what exactly your firm's critical roadblocks even are. So Iktamal, what are some of the biggest roadblocks facing firms that you're seeing in EMEA right now? And are there things that savvy leaders in the region are doing to get rid of them that we can learn from?
There are three main roadblocks that we've seen in EMEA. One is structural complexity. And that's just because companies in EMEA are not made to move at pace. They're made for slower economies. There's a lot of red tape. And second, there's skills and leadership shortage. And then thirdly, the third roadblock is change fatigue. And when people are tired, they disengage, and then you just don't get the productivity that you need from them. So what do savvy leaders do, to your question? Well, they simplify structures and trying to get rid of a lot of the red tape and simplify decision making. And they're also investing in training and learning and development.
Esther, I'm going to let you chime in on this one because you brought up roadblocks at the beginning here first. What about what Iktamal just said speaks to you? How are people addressing roadblocks where you are in APAC? Is it similar? Is it different?
I think it's pretty similar. Look, I think many companies were not built in Asia Pacific, especially in more conservative leaning countries like Japan or parts of China. So they're not built for this pace of change. And compounding that is, over the last few years, a trend of removing middle managers, sometimes with the idea that they may be removing a roadblock in there and certainly looking to cut costs. However, it's often been these middle managers at the intersection of strategy and execution that know some of the deeper roadblocks. They know where customers get hung up. They know what stalls teams. And so when you take that out, you don't actually know some of the deeper roadblocks. So leaders these days not only have to be strategic, thinking long-term, looking at the top, they really need to know what's happening at the deep layers of their business.
There is, I believe, a paradigm shift which is going on right now. We are applying old models, as Esther said earlier, to a new reality. Take the example of AI. AI, it has the name of intelligence. It's a new intelligence. And right now it's being dealt with mainly as a productivity tool. Therefore, we use a paradigm which is, let's increase productivity, cut costs, get middle managers, make it more difficult for younger people to get jobs because we can replace them by an algorithm, rather than thinking it is a new type of intelligence because it is learning all the time. The more you use it, the more you create value. It used to be the more you use the machine, you destroy value, you depreciate value. In the case of AI, you increase value because it is learning. How do we operate and lead that way?
Radhika, let's talk about that from now the worker perspective. Experts do see AI boosting output anywhere from 5 to 40%, possibly giving employees a bit more breathing room in their day. The question I have is, do you think leaders will give that extra time back to workers or expect them to just keep driving and pushing ahead? Where do you think it's going to land? And what do you think is the right call for leaders? What should they do in this case?
I think the answer lies in between. If you look historically with the advent of the computer and the internet, clearly we pushed harder and we pushed employees to do more with these tools. Output went up. It wasn't a reduction in work hours and better work-life balance. I think here we're in a danger that if this happens again, we are going to have severe issues in terms of wellness and mental health with our employee population. Now it's about actually, let's use AI as a tool to reallocate time to really help employees with their well-being, with training, with development, and really create whole human beings that can then go home and feel like there's more work-life balance with this tool rather than just utilizing the human touch to be able to be more productive.
Iktamal, but before we head to break, I do want to touch on how the past couple of years of fear around AI-fueled job replacement may be overblown. One study found that by 2050, only 13% of jobs can be fully automated by AI. So it does seem, as Radhika was alluding to, that the smart play for leaders this year is to figure out how do you meld human and AI capabilities? How do you bring those things together? Do you have a perspective on what's the right way to go about doing that?
Yeah, and I'm so pleased that people are pushing away the noise about this mass hysteria that AI and robots are going to come and take over the world and take over our jobs and there's going to be mass unemployment. I think people are tired of hearing that rhetoric and they understand the reality on the ground, that AI is here to help augment your role. So what do leaders need to do? And it's gone back to the basics. When we look at time in role, what are people spending their time on as an employee? And having a look at the tasks and thinking quite strategically and intentionally, what part of that role can be automated to free up more time? And what part of that role still needs a human-centric touch? And it's an exercise that organizations are going to have to go through. It's a bit of a culture change. It's a skills uplifting, but there will be parts of the roles that will be automated, the heavy lifting that, to be frank, most people don't want to be doing anyway. It's the highly repetitive tasks that they would rather a computer do. But that human element is never, ever going to go away.
One of the current topics of debate is around graduate hiring, actually. I recently met with a tech CEO and asked him what he regretted so far about his decisions related to AI adoption. And one was when he said there was a year when he decided they wouldn't need graduates anymore because AI would just do the work. And then very quickly realized that was a mistake because even though AI can do a lot of the work, of course, you still need people to review the work, people to train it. And where do you get your future leaders from?
Well, everybody, thank you for a really great discussion. So far, we've talked about how companies can tackle the new year. But when we come back from the break, we're going to discuss what professionals, workers can do to beat the odds in this very tight job market. So stay with us.
Hi, and welcome to This Week in Leadership. I'm Rupak Bhattacharya, and here's a quick look at what else is happening in business.
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
90% of healthcare executives now say that healthcare to remain viable needs to shift from reactive to proactive care delivery in the next 5 years. The shift comes thanks in large part to the revolution in data gathering technologies like sensors and wearable devices that have been widely collecting physiological data for over a decade, making preventative care more feasible than ever.
Structural collapse of the middle managing positions.
One group that had it particularly tough in 2025, managers. According to a Korn Ferry study, 41% of employees said their organizations created more pressure at the top last year by slashing management layers. This means more managers will likely use different tactics like hiring interim staff and doubling down on AI to get things done more efficiently.
Bore out to workers who feel chronically bored and unfulfilled in their jobs.
So-called bore-out may rival burnout in terms of its financial cost to companies, according to one study. In particular, the study cites the mental health toll, finding bored employees can cost an average 1,000-worker firm $5 million in lost revenue annually. Experts say leaders need to make a concerted effort in connecting employees to more impactful, meaningful, and strategic work. For more insights from This Week in Leadership, head to kornferry.com/insights. Now back to Jill and our episode, 2026 Beat the Odds.
The private payroll company saying private payroll shed 32,000 workers in November. That's the fourth negative number in the past 6 months for this series.
We've been talking with our international panel of experts about how companies can beat the odds in 2026, but now let's turn to the other vital side of the business ecosystem, employees. And let's find out what they can do to excel in this incredibly tough job market. That last clip was from CNBC's Steve Leisman, spouting a common headline last year around job cuts, which were notably high through much of 2025. Radhika, give us the lay of the land as we enter 2026. What are you hearing are the main reasons that companies seem to be cutting back or freezing their hiring?
And I do think that trend will continue, Jill, for sure, at least in 2026. And a few factors come to mind. So number one, the economic uncertainty is still out there. We really don't have a crystal ball. It's very, very cloudy in terms of what tariff implications are going to look like. We have geopolitical unrest that we haven't seen in decades right now. So that's one, economic uncertainty. We don't see that changing in the near term necessarily. Two, we talked about this a little bit earlier. It is the idea of AI and what types of jobs they will replace. And so companies are very resistant to hiring more. And lastly, we are at a time where there's a lot of pressure around cost. And one of the levers companies have is human capital, unfortunately. And so even if they are not laying off, they're probably not hiring at the numbers they were hiring years ago.
Iktamal, Esther, are you hearing the same things across EMEA and Asia Pacific, or are there some nuances in your markets?
If we have a look at EMEA, this geopolitical unrest is here, and there's a lot of it. And the tariffs coming into Europe are now, play, pause, stopped a lot of the manufacturing industry. The life sciences was severely impacted, technology. And so the economic uncertainty coupled with the fact that these organizations aren't built for agility and they can't move quickly with decision making has impacted hiring in EMEA. It's certainly down.
We see, yes, the geopolitical challenges as everywhere. I think wage inflation over the last couple of years has been very real, and also an increase in very employee-friendly legislation. And these things are all adding to employer costs. And so while costs are rising of having human capital, revenues aren't keeping up with that rise. So the costs of hiring new people are very real. So yeah, I agree with others that we're looking at hiring that is going to be slower and much, much more carefully considered.
Be the master of one. In my experience, it's hard to be above average in all aspects of the job, but it's relatively easy to stand out in one specific area.
That's YouTube career coach Jeff Sue echoing what many experts we've talked to have said, which is that in this precarious job market, employees have a better chance at securing their jobs by developing reputations as specialists. Jean-Marc, I'm curious to get your take on that. Do you see a world where people become increasingly hyper-specialized? Is there no more room for the generalist or that employee who kind of catches a little bit of everything?
Oh, I think there is room for both. But we are moving more and more to an economy where skills are important. Therefore, do you know how to do AI strategy or manage in an uncertain geopolitical context? However, the number one skill that we see is learning agility. Therefore, if you are able to adapt, take coding. Coding was very important 2 years ago. It was the hottest commodity do you know how to code? Or maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And now you have AI coding. So what do you do with that skill? And then you need to move to, okay, I'm going to build agents. Therefore, if you are not able to adapt, you may get out of the job.
Radhika, any other tip for professionals that, as you're working with them, folks that are looking to make themselves invaluable at work? Are there other skills and other things that you're seeing as being really critical?
Well, I think tactically speaking, you want to be AI ready as an individual. I think sometimes people and employees avoid that, and I think it's inevitable. And then we can't forget about networking. I think this goes back to the point around the remote work environment, and not everybody's remote, but there is a hybrid tendency across all industries. And people have either not learned how to network with decision makers and others within organizations, or they have learned it, but they're not using that muscle.
Last year, actually, a quarter of unemployed people in the U.S. were jobless for an average of 27 weeks. So I think that's a really important note. And in the U.K., it's not that different. Unemployment reached a high not seen since 2021. So Iktimal, Esther, any additional advice that you have for people to really stand out during what is undoubtedly a really difficult job market here?
I think there's just some back to basics and fundamentals, actually. Look, I think it's understanding the company and not just talking about yourself. And if you're demonstrating agility as a skill, it's not just saying I'm adaptable. It's really giving concrete, examples of how did you adapt and how were you agile, and tell the company and show them that you're going to be a hire that takes everything on quickly. It's not going to take, a year and a half for you to ramp up.
It's what's your story? So what story are you telling that's going to differentiate you from the thousands of other CVs and candidates that a hiring manager is looking for? So know who you are, know your achievements, know your story, and shout it from the rooftops.
Jean-Marc, any cautions for candidates that are using AI to tell their story?
Yes. I mean, we see there is a big issue right now that many candidates, too many, are using AI to write their letters of motivation or their resumes or their profile on LinkedIn. Therefore, the company is seeing that as also evolving, going back to more traditional ways of assessing.
Can I add to that from a leadership perspective, Jill? I think it's important for leaders within organizations to also make sure that they're authentic and not necessarily communicating with their population through AI. And I'll give an example of that for North America. I put together a Thanksgiving note for 4,000 plus employees, just, have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and talked a little bit about my family. And I wrote that from scratch. I did not use AI. I then took what I wrote, put it in a reverse app to make sure it came back that this was 100% not written by AI, to make sure that our population in North America, for example, really knew that that was coming from Radhika, the leader, not from my AI companion. And so I think it's really important, not only for kids coming out of school to not use AI to talk about who they are, but it's important for leaders to really model that from the top.
Since this episode is called Beat the Odds, I thought we'd end by reviewing the 4 categories that we've touched on in this chat. So you've got the always-on company, removing roadblocks, thriving with AI, and careening careers. I'm going to ask to go down the line here and ask each of you to very quickly name which of these categories speaks the most to you. As we head into 2026, which of these 4 are you most focused on and why? Radhika, let's start with you.
For me, I think it's the always-on type of mentality that we have going into the next couple of years. And the reason I really feel strongly about this particular topic is because of our employee wellness and well-being in general for all of us. I think that it is a critical moment that we need to make sure we take care of each other. And if we don't figure that out over the next 18 months or so, we are going to see more mental health issues and frankly, physical health issues with our employees.
Jean-Marc?
For me, it's, I think the thread is uncertainty, speed. I mean, the world is changing and the conditions of competition are changing. And the image that comes to mind is the image of hurricane, when you have the eye, which is strong and almost peaceful and quiet, at the center of the wheel as well. You have the axis, which has to be very stable so that you can handle all the turmoil around it.
All right, so 2 votes for always on company. Iktamal, where are you standing?
I'll go off-piste and go thriving with AI. I think if we have a look at recruitment as a function, it's being heavily impacted by the onset of AI. So my focus for 2026 is twofold. So one, making sure that our team within Korn Ferry are using AI sensibly and to their benefit, and making sure that they're getting smarter and more efficient in their roles. And then 2, helping our clients navigate what AI means for them as an organization.
And Esther?
I'm with Iktamal. I'm in the Thrive with AI camp as well. And maybe it's just the personal journey, it's the last couple of years when it first came out and you're like, what the heck is this? And then start dabbling with it, use it to create some research, review some things. And now I would say using it much more as a coach to ask for feedback, ask for suggestions. And so the possibilities are really fabulous.
Well, that was fun and very enlightening. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts today. For all of our viewers, here's wishing you knowledge and usefulness with everything you heard today so that you can beat the odds. Thanks for joining us. The executive producer of Briefings is Jonathan Dahl. Today's episode was produced by Rupak Bhattacharya and Zachary Dorr. And it was edited by Jaron Henry McRae. It contains reporting by Russell Perlman, Ariane Cohen, and Peter Loria. Our video segment contains original artwork by Fraser Milton, Haley Kennel, Jonathan Pink, and Sasha Kotschik. Don't forget to read our magazine, available at newsstands and at kornferry.com/briefings. That's it for Korn Ferry Briefings. I'm Jill Wiltfong. See you next time. Lady in Red. Yeah, I could go with that one.